Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here, got another Master Duel video for you today. So I figured some of you might be eager to see a deck that isn't Sprite, because I've definitely been covering Sprite decks very heavily over the last week or so here on the channel, which of course, you know, them being the newest deck and also having a massive impact on the meta. Upon release, you kind of figure, of course, we're going to cover them a lot, but I did want to take a step back here for a moment and cover a deck that wasn't them. So decided to come back to Mathmech today, a deck that is definitely still very, very viable in this meta, and is my pick for the top tier 2 deck of the current meta, being able to very much hold its own against Sprite, and is still, of course, very good against all the other decks that are currently in the meta. So let's talk about how we changed up this build for this meta. But before we do that, I also want to talk about real quick here, in my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. I mentioned this in the last video, but I'll mention again that I added a new tier recently, and that is a coaching tier. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching sessions, then subscribing with the coaching tier will allow you to get a 60-minute one-on-one session with me via Discord once per month for every month that you pledge. And in addition to that, you get all of the other benefits of the Patreon as well. That's going to be all of the daily Master Duel Patreon exclusive content that comes out over there. So if that's something that interests you, definitely, again, feel free to check out the Patreon linked in the description below. But yeah, Mathmech, let's talk about what we've changed up here. So we've definitely changed up a lot of the tech slots that we had in before. Most notably, we have included the Triple Tactics Talent. This is a card that I'm very, very up on in this current meta, and you've heard me talk about a lot about how good it is in Sprite decks. I think it's good just beyond Sprite, though. The prevalence of Sprite, as I've mentioned before, means that Sprite Elf, that monster's effect is going to be resolving during a large percentage of your turns, and that, combined with, of course, the ever-prevalence of disruption like Maxx and Ash Blossom, means that monster effects are going to be activating on your turn a lot. They already were like before, but they are definitely going to be activating even more during your turn. So Triple Tactics Talent, I think, is going to be a pretty meta-defining card in this current meta anyway. So I've definitely included 3 copies, and we'll see in games coming up that I'm very glad that I included these 3 copies of this card here, because it definitely saved me during more than one game there. Alright, as far as other changes we've made, you've noticed that ghost spells are out of the deck altogether. Yeah, those cards, like the ghost spells rather, it's not like terrible in this current meta, but the thing is, even though you can use it against Sprite, I think we've all kind of, we all know by now that Sprite is definitely capable of playing through like multiple pieces of disruption. So when you disrupt them, it really needs to be like a more, like, it's got to have an oomph to it. I will say Superfactorial is still very good for that. Being able to hit, especially being able to hit the level 2, like when they summon a level 2 monster, when they normal summon one, chaining the Superfactorial to get rid of it, and then you also, of course, is always going to rip a card out of their hand and then have a negate up as well. But often, like, just denying them the level 2 monster alone is enough. Like, that's going to be enough to stop them. So the Superfactorial is actually pretty good against Sprites. You just have to make sure that, obviously they don't have like a Sprite carrot or something on the field. Red Reboot was another tech card that I was playing before that is now out. It's just not, Sprites. I feel like that's enough. Like, do I need to say more when I talk about changes in, like, this deck? It's just like, yeah, Sprites. But more specifically, we're seeing, of course, Sprite being very prevalent, and Sprite is a deck that does not have a super powerful trap card to negate. Before they came out, every single deck out there had a really powerful trap card that you wanted to negate. For Mathmech, it's obviously going to be Superfactorial. For Sword Soul, it was Blackout. For Branded Despia, it was Branded Banishment, so on and so forth, right? Runics, it was always going to be their Floodgates. But now, all of the Sprite variants, like, yeah, they play Imperms. Pretty much every deck is on triple Imperm right now, including this one now, which I'll talk about in a sec. But, Imperms aside, they really don't have trap cards to hit with Red Reboot. And Imperm itself is not a reason to play Red Reboot. So, those are out. And, yeah, unfortunately, it's not just a good meta for them. I really like that card. It's a really, really good card when it hits, but it just does not hit the way it used to a week ago. Imperms, yeah, you can see we're on 3 of those now. I know I said that like a single disruption, like a single negate, is often not enough against Sprite, and that is generally true, but the Imperm on the Gigantic Sprite sometimes is actually enough to just stop their turn by itself, and most importantly, Imperm is a disruption that is not a monster, ergo does not trigger the triple tactics talent. So that's just one reason why Imperm is like particularly good and why we're on 3 copies of it in this deck now. I know I said that even like a week and a half, like 2 weeks ago, that Imperm is not a particularly good card in the current meta. That was Mathmech pre-Sprite meta. Because, in that deck, or in that meta where Mathmech was the most prominent deck, we were just seeing, obviously, a lot of Linguribohs on the board. And also, there were, like, a growing number of people teching the red reboot as well. So, I think for that and other factors, Imperm wasn't as good before, but now it's definitely a card that I'm once again looking to put 3 copies of in my deck here. Otherwise, the deck is largely the same. We're still on triple Subtraction as well as Addition. We're still on the Gatchiri and the Veiler because between these 2 cards and the Small World, any monster in this deck can bridge to any other monster. Just about, I think there's like maybe one line with Maxx to something else that doesn't work, but anything can get you to Circular. Any monster can get you to Circular in this deck with Small World. And again, the bridges are extensive enough that it is pretty much, again, not literally, but pretty much any monster to any other monster. So that's very useful for searching up like an Ash Blossom. If you already have all the combo pieces you need, you can still Small World and get some Maxx protection in there. So let me take a sip of water here real quick. And I think now I'm going to go ahead and just break down this list card by card, as I always do, before we look at some duels. So, in this current iteration of Mathmech, we are playing 1 Effect Veiler, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Mathmech Sigma, 3 Mathmech Addition, excuse me, 3 Mathmech Subtraction, 3 Mathmech Diameter, 3 Mathmech Circular, 1 Gatchiri Ad Ignister, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 3 Cynet Mining, 1 Mathmech Equation, 3 Triple Tactics Talent, 3 Small World, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 3 Infinite Impermanence, and then 1 Mathmech Superfactorial. It's going to be the main deck there. For the extra deck, we're on 2 Primathmech Laplacian, 2 Primathmech Alembertain, 1 Link Disciple, 1 Link Devotee, 1 Linguriboh, 1 Cyberse Wicckid, 1 Update Jammer, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Splash Mage, 1 Transcode Talker, 1 Mekhanite Crusadia Avermax, 1 Apollusa Bow the Goddess, and then 1 Accesscode Talker. Extra deck, real quick, we're on the exact same extra deck, no changes there, and I am very much still a fan of the double Laplacian. Turn 1 hand ripping is very, very good. I said cool and good in the same word, but it's both. It's very much both. So, yeah, there's the list. Now let's go and take a look at some gameplay. Alright, so our first opponent of this video is going to be a pure Sprite deck. It's a pretty standard Sprite list. It's on the Nimble, excuse me, the 4-card Nimble package, and it's playing Gammas. Alright, so we'll be taking the first turn here. Look at my opening hand. We're looking very solid here. I like having Maxx, even if I'm going first. This card's obviously just something you always want to see. The Crossout Designator is some nice installation. We also have Small World with a couple of options to bridge here. We could either do Subtraction or Gatchiri. Which card you would Small World away here pretty much matters on what you value more. With the Subtraction, we have the ability to make Laplacian and Hand Rip on the first turn, but if we hang on to the Gatchiri Ad Ignister, we can add a material to our Apollusa, adding 800 attack and a negate, and then we can also make it unaffected during our opponent's turn as well. So again, it's really just going to depend on what you value more. And maybe I do overvalue this a little bit, but I really like the second Laplacian. I really like the Hand Rip on turn 1. It's very, very nice. It's so backbreaking, and it's won me so many games that this is what I'm honestly going to prioritize in this situation. So I'm going to start by activating my Small World, then I'm going to reveal the Gatchiri ad ignister from my hand, and then the Effect Veiler out of my deck. That's going to let me get into Mathmech Circular. If I had revealed the Subtraction, for those who are curious, then we could have done it a number of ways. Well, actually not really a number of ways, but it would have been Subtraction. That's the thing too, is that we had Gatchiri in hand, so we can't use Gatchiri as a bridge. So I think actually for that reason I couldn't have even used Subtraction now that I think about it. You know what? I have it in my head that I'm still on my tournament build from week 2 of MCS. I thought I was on 2 Gatchiri. So yeah, with 1 Gatchiri in the deck, we had to use the Gatchiri from hand there. That said, I do still think it was the right choice personally. But alright, in any case, now we can just go ahead and throw out the Circular by sending Sigma to the graveyard. Now specialing Sigma, we can use the Circular's effect in order to add the Superfactorial. And again, with just the Subtraction in hand, we are on a clear path towards making our opponent discard a card here. Alright, Alembertain's coming down. Going to detach the materials to add the Diameter. Then we can normal Diameter, bring back one of our Mathmech monsters. And then following that, we're going to go into both Link Disciple and Devotee. Yeah, when you go disrupted, or undisrupted rather, on your turn 1, especially with an extended line like this, it definitely does not feel like this deck is any less powerful than it was before, which of course you could say for any deck, but you know, lest we forget, and it was pretty easy for me to forget amid Sprite hype, before I came back to Mathmech for this video, that, oh yeah, Mathmech still pretty crazy in all the stuff that it does. Yeah, so here I activated Subtraction first. What I guess it could have done, it doesn't super duper matter, but I could have activated Splash Mage first and then gone for Wicckid, and then special the Subtraction into that zone to trigger the Wicckid's effect. We'll just summon Laplacian into this zone. It really doesn't matter. I mean, either way, even if I didn't, IP Masquerena is going to end up there anyway, so we would have gotten the Wicckid search no matter what. That is one bit of zone placement that you don't have to be like super stressed about, although, you know, as always as ever, you want to just be generally mindful of the zone placement. So I look at the card it made my opponent discard. I see a Sprite Blue. That makes me feel really, really good, obviously, to see that being ripped from the opponent's hand. You know, it is important to note that my opponent could still very easily have Jet or Starter or another blue, so it's not like a guarantee, but seeing such an important combo piece discarded so early on is definitely a very good sign. So now, like I said, I'm just going to go into IP Masquerena next. After that, we'll set both the Superfactorial and the Crossout Designator, and then we'll call it a turn. We'll pass over to our opponent. So this is very much what an ideal turn 1 for me looks like in this deck. Just because, again, like I mentioned before, I personally very much value the Laplacian hand rip. I think it's super duper good. And I do think with an extender, it is, in my opinion, the best thing you can do on turn 1. Of course, that's on top of setting up the Superfactorial, in addition to all that stuff as well. And all it takes is just Circular plus any extender. It can be, well, it can be Diameter, Addition, or Subtraction. Sigma actually does not do it, but if you open Circular plus, again, Diameter, Addition, or Subtraction, there is your turn 1 hand rip combo there. Now, during my opponent's draw phase, I'm going to toss out the Maxx. I have, of course, mentioned this many times, but for those of you who have not yet heard me say this, I do generally advise doing this in this meta. In the past, I have said save the Maxx for when your opponent special summons to make sure you get a guaranteed draw. I will advise, generally speaking, against doing that in this meta because of the prevalence of Triple Tactics talent. And so many people playing that card in their decks, like so many more people now, that I would generally advise throwing out Maxx during the draw phase. There is an exception. I will say that if you're on sprites and you have Sprite Elf on the board, then you still want to Maxx during the main phase, because if your opponent goes to call by it, you can chain Sprite Elf, special the Maxx. It's not in the graveyard, it won't get banished and negated, and it will still resolve. But, you know, obviously we're not on Sprite Elf, so I'm going to toss out the Maxx during the draw phase there. There might be other niche reasons to not toss out Maxx during the draw phase, but generally speaking, I think playing around Triple Tactics talent in this meta is correct. Alright, so the opponent's going to lead with a Hard Beast Feather Duster, which, like, it looks a lot worse than it is. It really just means that we're going to have to chain the Superfactorial now. Obviously, like I said before, I would much rather wait until my opponent has a monster on the board in order for me to be able to wipe that out, especially again against sprites, because if they summon a level 2 monster, and like if they just normal summon, let's say like a Maxx or something, right? Then you can just get rid of that, and they won't have a level 2 monster in play for them to special more of their sprites. And then, of course, getting the negate up early is never a bad thing either. So opponent does the Duster, I chain the Superfact, and then they just conceded after that? I guess, I don't know. I don't really know what they thought was going to happen, because they knew I searched the Superfactorial. It's kind of what Mathmech does, but whatever. I guess my opponent kind of... I guess losing the Sprite Blue really was enough to make my opponent just concede there. So that was pretty nice. Alright, there's that duel. Let's go and take a look at the next one here. So here we have yet another game up against Pure Sprite. This one is running an interesting tech choice that we'll actually see during the duel, so I won't necessarily spoil it just yet. This time we are going to be taking the second turn. Opponent's going to go first here. We've only got the Impermanence Disruption, but otherwise our hand's actually not looking too bad at all. This is the bit of tech that I was referring to earlier. This is going to be Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy. Can special it from your hand if you control no monsters. The appeal of a tech like this, you might be wondering, like, okay, or you might be thinking rather, like, okay, I get that level 2 monsters work with sprites, but this seems like a really random level 2 monster. It is actually less random than it looks. The reason that this one would be good is because it special summons. It special summons from the hand, and that way if your opponent happens to disrupt it, like let's say with an IP into Nightmare Unicorn, or like a Mathmech Superfactorial into Laplacian, or something like that, then you could still potentially normal summon a different level 2 monster and then be able to special summon your sprite monsters from there. After summoning the Infernal Prodigy, looks like they're on a sprite red after that, and then they're just going to overlay into the gigantic sprite. So this is the ideal situation to open Infinite Impermanence against sprite, is when they go straight into the gigantic sprite and they don't seemingly have any other follow-up play. Now, of course, it could be easy for my opponent to just drop like a sprite starter here, but I'm a bit more inclined to think they would have led with that. With a hand like that, I would think you'd want to use, well, I don't know, I guess you could make an argument either way. I was going to say I would think you'd want to use Sprite Starter as a bait to make sure the gigantic sprite resolves if you're afraid of Ash. But you could actually make an argument for the other. You could really, I could see it either way. It's one of the things I talked about recently in the tier list video about how Pure Sprite is like such an unsolved deck. And I mostly referenced its deck building, but like maybe this is just me not, needing more practice with Pure Sprites, but there's a lot of lines where it's like, I could really see an argument for either line. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Pure Sprite, we're here to talk about Mathmech. So, like I said, this is a situation where we like having Imperm against the gigantic sprite. We can just negate it outright, and even if our opponent's got like a blue or a jet in hand, they can't special it right now, because they don't have a, or no, I think they can special it. I can never remember actually. No, red and carrot is level in Link 2. I should know that off the top of my head. I'm kind of embarrassed I don't actually. Whatever. Anyway, I'm going to throw out Cynet Mining here. This Cynet Mining discard, I want to talk about this for a second. This was actually a really difficult decision here when I activated the Cynet Mining, what I wanted to throw out. But it was between Addition and Equation. It was actually not a matter of deciding if I should discard the Triple Tactics Talents. I absolutely wanted to keep this Triple Tactics Talents. I very, very highly value this card, in case you can't tell from how much I've just been gushing about it lately. But, yeah, just especially in this meta, especially with a hand like this, where I really am one disruption away from, like, losing with this hand. So, I really like having the talents here. I decided to discard the Addition because I figured if I really need to, I could, Equation and bring back Addition, like if things really were like the worst case scenario, but obviously, the Addition would be a little less impactful in hand than the Equation in that situation. So, yeah, anyway, we had the called by for their Maxx, thankfully, and I could talents here, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I'm just going to start with my Mathmech line and see how far I'm going to end up going with that first. Well, see how far into the OTK I can go, because I do have the means to OTK here. But it's going to largely depend on what my opponent's backer is. they had a Solemn Judgment to both negate and destroy the summon of my Alembertain, which, it's unfortunate. Like, the Solemn Judgment having their life points really made me think, like, there's a decent chance I might be able to actually OTK them here. And I really tried to find the line and see if I could do it, but I don't know. I wasn't really sure if it was possible. I was still actually figuring it out at this point in the duel when I activated Equation to bring back the Circular, and then activated the Triple Tactics talent in order to take control of my opponent's gigantic sprite here. Let me actually look at my extra deck now that, you know, it's not the middle of the game and I actually have the time to do this, because I don't think... Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Here's what it was, is... I could have activated the Gigantic Sprite's effect in order to get a Maxx, and then I could have linked it to an IP Masquerena, but of course only the Circular can attack. And also I'm locked into level rank in Link 2 if I use Gigantic Sprite's effect. So no, I don't... Well, okay, hang on a second. Let me think. I'm just trying to think I'm trying to think if I could have finagled something here. I don't think I could have, honestly. No, not with that restriction of being locked into, again, level rank in Link 2. So, yeah, really the best option I had here was just punch my opponent for 2,500, and then main phase 2, you know, link these off to get my Circular in the grave and their Sprite off the field, and then make my Superfactorial live. But my opponent just ended up conceding as soon as I took control of the Gigantic Sprite. I don't know if they just figured I had a way to make lethal. I don't know if they didn't realize I could only attack with one monster that turn because I had activated Circular's effect, but for whatever the reason it may be, my opponent just ended up conceding right after I took control of their Gigantic Sprite. I mean, it could also just be because, you know, I'm in D1, Diamond 1. This is like definitely, what's that DJ Khaled meme, suffering from success? This is definitely a bit of a suffering from success kind of complaint, but when you're in Diamond 1, people tend to concede a lot earlier than, you know, in other parts of Ranked Ladder, obviously because they won't, you know, they don't have to worry about losing games and dropping rank once you're at Diamond 1. So I think if this were an actual, like, ranked game that really mattered, or a tournament duel, my opponent would have just straight up conceded there, and there would have been a bit more of back and forth. But again, I don't think it would have been hard for me to just link off the Circular. Like, I could have just linked off Circular and Gigantic Sprite for IP, then set the Superfactorial. The Superfact is live. I don't have a Diameter engraved. My opponent only had one card in hand, so, you know, they draw a card for turn, they play a card, I Superfact, I get rid of the card on board and the one in hand, and then it's just over at that point, pretty much. So yeah, alright, there's that game. We got a couple more to take a look at, so let's jump into the next one. Surprise, surprise, we are up against Sprite once again. This time we're up against Tri-Brigade Sprite, though, so good old Tri-Sprite. We're going to take the first turn here. Let's see how well we open. Not too bad at all. The two Small World is a bit redundant, but we definitely like seeing Small World. We have the Ash Blossom in case they Maxx. They've actually got an Ash Blossom of their own for our Small World, but definitely not that big of a deal. Sigma Plus Addition is still the standard turn 1 combo here, so no need to worry. Just gonna overlay those two into our Primathmech Alembertain, and then detach material to add the Circular. We've already got the Sigma in the graveyard, so I'm actually going to pitch a Diameter with this Circular. Now I can bring back Sigma with its effect because I normal summoned it. I didn't special summon it from my hand. And that'll let me add the Superfactorial with the Circular. Now I'm going to go for the Link Disciple and Devotee to follow that up. Pretty standard stuff here. Alright, now I'm going to use the Alembertain effect. Let's go ahead and sack off the Devotee to bring back my... I chose Diameter, but it doesn't matter which Mathmech you get back here. And after that, I'll link away the Disciple and a token for Cyberse Wicckid. Finish setting up our board here, using the token to go for a Linguriboh. That being summoned into Wicckid Zone is going to let me search a Diameter from my deck to my hand, guaranteeing me a follow-up play for the next turn. And then the Diameter and the Alembertain are going to go into IP. And then we'll set the Superfactorial and pass over to our opponent. So definitely a pretty good start for me here. As you can see, we got the standard opening board here of these three monsters and the Superfactorial. And yeah, we didn't get to hand rep, but our opponent throwing out the Ash Blossom in vain was pretty much like getting a hand rip in there, so they started with one fewer card all the same. Alright, they're going to be on the Tri-Brigade Fractal here. I'm going to go ahead and chain the Ash Blossom to negate that. They had a called by, but I wasn't concerned at all, honestly, because I get to chain the IP Masquerena effect, and even though the Ash Blossom is going to negate the Tri-Brigade Fractal, or rather, the Ash Blossom is negated so it can't negate the Tri-Brigade Fractal, the IP is going to go into an Apollusa, and that can just negate the kit that Fractal is going to send. So, either way, I'm going to ensure that my opponent is not going to get a search with the Nerval in the end here. Note also that I went for a 2-material Apollusa, keeping the Linguriboh up. Generally speaking, I advise doing this because it plays around Infinite Impermanence. So, you know, the opponent can't just like slam down an Imperm and then negate your Apollusa, and then you're really sad. But also specifically in this matchup, like in the world where somehow, you know, they go through my Apollusa negates or my Linguriboh survives the turn, this is obviously going to be able to negate Tri-Brigade Revolt. So these decks that do have a powerful trap card, I generally, if possible, like to leave Linguriboh around. But also, generally speaking, to play around Imperm, I like holding the Linguriboh so that I can protect the Apollusa from the Imperm there. Alright, so the rest of the chain is going to resolve here. My Ash gets negated. The Fractal is going to resolve. It'll send a Kit. Kit's effect is going to activate, but like I said, I'll just negate that with Apollusa, so that way it can't send Nerval, and my opponent won't get a search. It'll also stop them from putting... I mean, to be fair, 2 Tri-types in graveyard is enough, and the opponent's going to summon Tri-Brigade Chaos here, so... yeah, looks like they were definitely looking to make a play by banishing the Kit and the Fractal. As a result, I'm definitely going to flip up this Superfactorial in response to the summon of Chaos. That way I can get it off the board before it has a chance to activate its effect. Gonna bring back all 3. My opponent actually chains the Sprite starter, which is relief. When I saw a Quick Play spell come down, I thought it was just going to be the call by from the grave, but nope, it's a Sprite starter for a Jet, which is like, you know, if they're startering for Jet, I kind of don't get this blind, honestly. Like, I don't really know why you would ever starter for Jet, because then Jet's only able to get, like, a Smashers. I feel like wouldn't you want to starter for Blue, and then Blue can add Jet, and then you can special Jet for the, you know? I don't know. But, yeah, I'm definitely just going to drop this Laplacian here. Then I'll activate Laplacian's effect. I'm going to send the Chaos and their card in hand, which was a Blue. I guess that's why they got Jet, was because they already had Blue in hand. I guess they just figured they would be fine, but... no, I think even with the Blue in hand, you still get a Sprite Blue there. Because you have to know, again, that my Laplacian is going to resolve. But it didn't really matter, to be fair. Like, I still had 2 more negates in the Apollusa and the Diameter effect on the Laplacian as well. Well, and the Linguriboh, if you want to count that as a negate, too. So, alright, there is that game. We have one more to take a look at. Let's go straight into it. For our final duel of this video, we're going to be up against Sky Striker. It's definitely been a minute since I've seen this deck on ladder, so... Although I don't remember much of... No, you know what? I do remember this game. Never mind. No, wait, no, this isn't the game I'm thinking of. I don't know. I don't even know. I won't even pretend to guess. Anyway, we're going to go first here. Pretty standard opening, you know, turn 1 here where we got the Circular plus Extender, so that's going to be a... turn 1 Laplacian there for the hand rip. We always love to see that. And fortunately, we opened the Crossout Designator for their Maxx. I think Crossout Designator is really good. Like, I mean, I've always thought it was really good. Just to play around stuff like Maxx and Ash Blossom. Even if you're not playing a whole bunch of stuff like Valor and Nibiru and Feather Duster to counter a whole bunch of staples, like, I think Crossout being anti-Maxx and anti-Ash Blossom and anti-Imperm, like, even by itself is enough of a reason to play it. So, opponent's got an effect failure to stop our Alembertain Surge. That's definitely not ideal, but it's also not the end of the world either. We can just special the Subtraction and normal summon the other one, and then we'll just do that in order to go into our Link Disciple and Devotee play. We're not going to be able to use the Alembertain effect on... Well, I mean, we can use the Alembertain effect to what is it? To tribute the Disciple here, or the Devotee rather, but there's no reason not to use Disciple's effect and get the, like, draw cycle on top of it. So actually when I go to activate Devotee's effect, which I have to, my opponent Ghost Ogres it, which is definitely not ideal. That means I'm not going to get my tokens, I can't end on Wicckid and like the whole, setup there, but well, I can end on Wicckid, I just can't end on the IP Masquerena and or Linguriboh to go with it. So no search, but I am still going to make the Wicckid. The reason is that I've got the Superfactorial in my hand, so on my next turn, or rather on my opponent's turn, I can Superfactorial, summon one of the materials to Wicckid zone, and then I'll get a search to set up for my next turn with the Diameter, just to make sure that I have a play. I've also got the Imperm on top of the Superfact, and my opponent's only going to be on 3 cards, so I'm actually pretty confident, and this is just one of the reasons why I think Mathmech is so good. Like you saw, our opponent had like multiple disruptions for us. They had 3 different bits of it. And yeah, we had the counter from Maxx, but they still resolved 2 very relevant pieces of disruption against us there. And despite that, we're still able to end on a play. And not just a play, but a pretty solid one too. Now, again, we don't have the Diameter set up in the grave, so we don't get a negate. But with our opponent having used as much disruption as they did, they're on few enough cards that, between the Imperm and the Superfactorial, I'm pretty confident I can stop them from doing anything relevant this turn. And then again, we'll have the Wicckid Surge to set up for our next turn as well. We're just going to start off with the Desires. I'll just let that resolve. I'm not going to chain anything in response. Obviously, I don't really have much chain in response. And they just concede after that. So I guess the 2 cards they got off the Desires there just weren't enough to help them come back over the Superfactorial. So, alright, there are those games. Thank you very much for watching those. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.